This is the only book that Francis Ledwidge ever held in his hands of his own work. It's called Songs of the Field. He received it while existing on starvation rations in Serbia in the winter of 1915. He was born in 1887 in a labourer's cottage in Slane in County Meath. His father was an agricultural worker. That's the sort of job where you can work into your 80s and still be called boy. Ledwidge left school at 14 with aspirations to be a poet, but he worked as a road worker, he worked as a miner, he worked as a farm labourer. He worked by his hands and lived for his poems. In 1912 he sent a copybook of his poems to a local writer, Lord Dunsany in Dunsany, who lived 20 miles and a million miles away socially. Dunsany recognised the genius at the heart of Ledwidge's work and encouraged him and set him on the path of what should have been a great career in many, many ways. In 1914, Francis Ledwidge surprised everybody in Slane by enlisting because he'd been against John Edmund's call for Irish men to volunteer in the war, but he was called a pro-German coward. Maybe thinking the war was going to be over, the fact that he had no job despite all of his bludgeoning success as a poet, of new fame as a poet, the fact that he was coming from a love affair meant that he enlisted in Richmond Barracks in Dublin and had a very, very tough, difficult war. He survived Gallipoli, he survived Serbia, he was crippled with arthritis, he was actually in hospital in Egypt and then in Manchester when the Easter Rising broke out, and he died 100 years ago this year on the first day of the third battle of Ypres. He was building a road a mile behind the front, and this is what he did in Meath. He was a road worker. He was building a road a mile behind the front when they paused for tea, himself and a small company of men, and a stray shell, I couldn't tell you was it a British or was it German, landed on the spot and killed him instantly. And in some ways he might have been forgotten, but he has, because in some ways he died in the wrong uniform for Irish history and everything else, but he's lived on in the hearts of poetry lovers in Ireland and abroad. And so while many of the very, very famous writers of his day are now forgotten, Francis Ledwidge's spirit burns as much as ever. In 1992 I edited a small selected poems with Seamus Heaney looking over my shoulder slightly and writing a very fine introduction, and we just tried to keep it as very, very tight to the very, very best poems that he'd actually written. And I want to read one poem from it called Soliloquy. It's interesting, this is his third and last book. 2 books were published after his death, and very interestingly this poem is censored. It's very interesting how a poet of his class couldn't quite say what he wanted to say, and so the last line was removed in this book, and it's reinstated in other books including this book. And it's a poem about somebody drinking wine in France, about somebody not understanding that death may be coming very, very close for him as a soldier. It's quite unlike some of his other work. You can feel his own voice beginning to come out, to break away from the conventions of Georgian poetry. And there was this really interesting young man who had never lived to see his 40th birthday beginning to speak in his own voice, and we will never ever know the mystery of where that voice would have taken him if a stray shell hadn't taken him first. Soliloquy. When I was young I had a care, lest I should cheat me of my share, of that which makes it sweet to strive for life and dying still survive, a name in sunlight written higher than lark or poet dare aspire. But I grew weary doing well, besides 'twas sweeter in that hell, down with the loud banditti people who robbed the orchards, climbed the steeple for jackdaws' eggs, and made the cock crow ere 'twas daylight of the clock. I was so very bad my neighbours spoke of me at their daily labours, and now I'm drinking wine in France, the helpless child of circumstance. Tomorrow will be loud with war. How will I be accounted for? It is not too late to retrieve a fallen dream, too late to grieve a name unmade, but not too late to thank the gods for what is great, a keen-edged sword, a soldier's heart, is greater than a poet's art, and greater than a poet's fame, a little grave that has no name, whence honour turns away in shame.